Welcome. Thank you guys so much for coming. We are going to talk about math foundations in kindergarten. So let's get started. All right, the first thing we're going to talk about is one-to-one correspondence. So this is dealing with counting objects, and it's very abstract for children. They're dealing with a lot of information in their brain, from the counting sequence to the number symbol, to actually relating that to the quantity that's being counted. So in our classrooms, we encourage them to touch one object at a time when we're counting objects, and to state one number at a time as they count. A lot of times in our classrooms, we'll see students and they'll start counting 1, 2, 3, and they'll be doing a great job touching each object, and then they'll go 4, 5, 6, 7, and they won't move along with the finger, or they won't count the objects. And the other thing we see a lot of is their eyes, and they'll count with their eyes and their head will bob a little. But for accuracy right now, we're actually wanting them to touch the objects and state the number. Another strategy we teach them is moving the objects. So as they count maybe a pile, they're taking the item and moving it to a different area or lining them up. It helps a lot because sometimes we present the items in a circle or in a pile or in an array, and it's harder for them to keep track. And that talks about not counting with your eyes. And we have some ideas. Some ideas for practicing at home. So if you have a bag of goldfish that you give them, or a box of raisins, they could practice counting their snack. As they get more proficient, you could actually have them group numbers, like put the raisins in groups of 5, or put the raisins in groups of 10, and just practice counting each individual object. We talked about counting going up steps, or counting books on a shelf, counting toys. I know we have millions of things in our home that we can count. Or if you visit the grocery store, as you put items in the cart, your child could count. Grab bag game is a fun game that we actually play in class. So you have a bag, mine are like little brown lunch bags, and you put a ton of objects in there. It could be pennies or Cheerios or anything you want, and they reach in and grab out a handful of the item and then spread them out and move and count how many objects are in the handful. I did it again, didn't I? I need to hit the right thing. Okay, so rote counting is basically counting aloud, and we are going to be working on this throughout the year. The first quarter goal was to count to 20, and then next quarter we'll be up to 50, and by the end of the year we'll be at 100. And this is done without any visuals, so they're just truly counting aloud, and they don't have any manipulatives to use or hundreds chart. So the numbers can't be skipped or set out of order. Many times they'll say like 14, 16, 18, 19, 20, they'll skip a number. So we want them to count accurately each number. And then another common mistake that we hear are them saying the teen number names for the tens. So a lot of times they'll say 17 instead of 70. So we really stress the teen when they're in the teen numbers, and T when they're in the numbers that are by tens. Third time's the charm. So some practice, you could have them move while counting. We do like running and jumping jacks to counting while you're in the car. You could count while you walk together. And there's a ton of number counting videos on YouTube, from cowboy count to exercise count videos. ABC Ya has a hundreds chart, pretty much similar to this one, but it has different colors that they can select and they can fill in. For instance, they could mark in all of the numbers counting by 10, or they could mark in the numbers as they count. And using the visual support in the beginning while they're learning to count to 100 is fine. Just remember that later they won't have the visual when we're asking them to count out loud. They do also have to count by tens to 100, so by ones and by tens. All right, I have 2 examples or activities to go with this part of the session. So the first is a paper that looks like this. It's just a paper with dots on it, and it helps them to organize their counting. So you could have this in front of them, and you could tell them to count 5, for instance. And a lot of times, they'll start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They don't stop. They keep going past their number. And other times they might not fill in the top first. When we're first starting out, we like them to fill in the top so that they can actually see that 5 group. It helps them when we're using 5 frames and 10 frames later. And Mrs. Lindstedt will talk about subitizing, and it helps with that as well. So this is a little mat, so we call it like a work mat to help them with counting. What we're actually working on right now is them recognizing that 5 group and actually saying 5, 6. Another useful item that probably everybody has at home is just an egg carton. And if you cut off 2 of the spots, then you have the 10 frame. And you can use that with little manipulatives. You could use Cheerios or raisins or whatever you have at home. And you could tell them to count out a certain number, like 7 or 8. And again, they could fill it in. And it helps to see. And Mrs. Lindstedt will talk more about that too, about how the questioning that we do when we're working with numbers like that. On this handout, the 2 items that I talked about are on here with ideas also listed. And this presentation is being recorded and will be available for your viewing pleasure. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So I am talking about number recognition and writing. So students will be asked to recognize numbers up to 20 and write numbers up to 20 by the end of the year. Right now we're just up to 10, but we'll be doing teen numbers soon. This can sometimes be difficult because they're learning their letters at the same time they're learning their numbers, and a lot of them will flip them around, like the 9 looking like a P or a Q, and mixing them up. And so it does take a lot of practice, which is why we recommend doing it at home too. A lot of students flip the numbers, so like a 5, instead of writing it across and down and around, they'll flip it the other way. Or even like a 3, they flip it facing the other direction. That's totally fine. If they do that on assessment, it's counted correct. That's what their brains do at this point. It's still developing. So just don't worry about that right now. It's okay to correct them, but it's really fine at this point in their development. The only time it gets really tricky when they do reverse things is when it changes place value. So once we get into teen numbers, if they are writing 17 and they flip the 2 and they write 7 and then a 1, that changes the value of the number. So that will be counted as like incorrect, and we'll talk a lot about that. The way that we explain it to them is that this 1 is not a 1 in 17. This 1 is representing a hiding 10. So it's really awesome if you use the same language at home, because then they start to get used to it. So a lot of them say, oh, it's a 1 and a 7, and then they'll just write a 7 and a 1, and they'll flip it around. So if you tell them, oh, that 1 represents a hiding 10, and a lot of times we'll even write the 10, we'll erase the 0. There's not 0 extra 1s, there's actually 7 extra 1s. That way they start to visualize, oh, it has to be a 10, so they'll write the 10, and they'll be like, wait, there's not 0 extra 1s, there's 7 extra 1s. So that will really help with them not flipping the 2 and start to recognize what a T number looks like, one group of 10, and then some extra 1s. So
So here's some ideas that you can do at home. Of course, flashcards, asking what number it is, scattering flashcards around your home, and that'll keep your child engaged and busy for a little while because they'll have to go find all the numbers, and then it'll be really fun if they were able to put them in order. We talk a lot about ordering numbers, putting them in a number line. That really, really is good for their conceptual knowledge. So if you scatter numbers 1 to 20 and then ask them to put them in order once they find them all, writing in sand, writing in chalk, with paint, writing their numbers, really anything to make it more fun. Memory match game, they could flip 2 cards over and find the 2 sevens, or they could flip 2 cards over and try to find 7 dots and the number 7. Roll and write, so rolling 1 or 2 dice and writing how many they got. So the next latest thing is subitizing, which I didn't grow up with, for sure. So subitizing is being able to see a group or a number without actually counting it. So it's what you do when you play a game. You roll a die. Nobody really counts the 6 pips on the die. You just know that that's 6 because of how it's arranged. So we teach them subitizing a lot, and right now we're using a 5 frame and a 10 frame to help teach them that. And I'll talk more about that. But what we do, at first, we just did simple numbers. So we'll have a card like this, and we'll flash it to the class. And we'll say, how many? And they'll go, 1. And then we start to get harder. Right now we're up to 10, but we'll flash it. We usually give them 3 seconds or less. And they have to tell us how many without counting. And we talk a lot about, well, how did you know without counting that? And they'll have to verbally explain what groups they saw. So this will really help them as they get older, seeing those groups and then being able to add and subtract mentally with those groups. So with the subitizing, we have a little, I'll put it in the doc here. So these are some example cards that you can take home with you. So what we talk a lot right now, we'll have these like flash up, and students will call it a number and we'll say, okay, how did you know it was, say, 7? And they'll say, I saw a group of 5 and I saw 2 extra. So we're really using the language, I see groups. So if they see a group of 5 like this and an extra, another thing we'll talk about, oh, did you see a group of 5? Well, how did you know? I saw a group of 5 and 1 extra one. And this will really help them when they start getting into addition. What's 4 plus 1? Oh, I know that's 5. And then this is where it all came from. And then especially like this, when they start to see 2 groups of 5, they know it's 10. But if there's 1 missing, they'll know it's 9. That's helping their conceptual number life. It's just a really good foundational skill for later in their lives. And we do encourage them, though, if you can't subitize, if it's not a subitizing task, to still count and move the numbers. So we don't want them to like mix them up and think, oh, I just have to flash and know every single number. So that's the tricky thing. We also love YouTube. It has a lot of great subitizing videos. I should talk about the 10 frame. So first we talked about the 5 frame with them. So we talked a lot about if the 5 frame is full, because it holds 5 things, how many do you have? And they know it's 5. If there's 1 missing and the other are full, how many? 4. So they got really used to using this language. Then right now we're on to the 10 frame, which we just started. So now we're talking about how this is basically 2 groups of 5. So if the 10 frame is full, you have 2 groups of 5, and you know that that's 10. If it's full on the top and 1 missing on the bottom, then you know it's 5, and 4 more, you know that's 9. And we just use a lot of, that's 5 and 2 extra ones. That's 5 and 2 extras, so that's 7. We like them to fill up the top so they see the group of 5, as Ms. Holst was saying, and then the 2 extras on the bottom. But you can find all this stuff online. YouTube has a lot of subatizing videos if you just look it up that they love. So it'll flash, oh, it's kind of hard to see, but it'll flash it, and then sometimes I'll pause and, how did you figure that out? And talk it over. They also have ones that are 10 frame flashes, so it'll look like this, and it'll just flash, and they have to tell you how many. So these are just things that we do in the classroom that build their knowledge that will really help them the next few years as things get much more complicated. And that's it. So let us know if you have any questions.
And we're here, and if you took a survey and you'd like to fill it out, we'd be happy to turn it in for you. And yeah, if you have any questions, just let
And all
us know.
the handouts are back here too.
And the making, yeah.